Hi, I'm Steve Barlow. This is the Humanised Workforce Future You podcast video, where we're talking about perceptions of the future, issues that we need to be aware of, and their role in a rapidly changing work and life environment.
Hi, I'm Craig Saffin. The Humanised Workforce Future You podcast series is focused on the key factors evolving to create a more humanised workforce and how people from all walks of life are creating their future selves.
Welcome to the Humanised Workforce Future You podcast. My name's Steve Barlow, and as always, I'm joined today by Craig Saffin. How are you, Craig?
Good, Steve. I'm glad the rain's finished in Sydney at last. But we're nearly drowned along the coast here, haven't we? So
it's been rough. It's been very rough. Today, we've got a special guest, Amanda Knows, and Amanda is joining us from Nice in France. So welcome, Amanda. It's good to have you here today. Amanda, do you want to give our listeners a little bit of an idea about your background, who you are and what you do and so on?
Yes, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Craig, for having me. So I'm a bit of a chameleon. I do quite a few different things. My background is in the technology and telecom industry. I started in Australia, worked my way around the world. I worked in Paris in the 90s. Then I worked in Raleigh, North Carolina, Petaluma, near the San Francisco Bay Area, and then back to this area. And then just as COVID hit, I left the corporate world. And I've been doing basically two different things. One is starting up my own company as a consultant, doing transformation and change, marketing communications type work. And the other is I've been quite involved in two different nonprofit areas. One is the Professional Women's Network down here on the Nice Côte d'Azur, which I was the VP of Partnerships, and now I'm the president of that network. And the second is as a board advisor to the Centre for Optimism in Melbourne, which is, of course, how I met Craig and Steve.
Right. Okay, that's quite eclectic, isn't it? I had a short stint working in Raleigh for Nortel some time ago, and I'm not sure if Nortel's still there or whatever, but anyhow, it's an interesting part of the world, isn't it, Caroline's? Can I ask you, today mostly we're focusing on optimism, and it seems that you've got a lot of experience and things that lead towards optimism, although I expect when you started your career, you didn't set out with that in mind as a specific, but you've ended up there as part of your aspect of talking about optimism, and I think it's got a lot of relationship with your Professional Women's Network as well, by the way. So can you tell us what do you think optimism is? What is your understanding of the definition for optimism?
So the definition that we tend to use at the Centre for Optimism is that optimism is the belief that things will work out in the end. And some people add, if it doesn't work out yet, it's not the end. We also go down into the detail of the type of optimist, and there's a whole list of different type of optimists. And I think I'm lucky that I'm a bit of a natural optimist. I really do always expect things to work out, and I'm usually surprised when they don't work out. So I always start things with the idea that things will work out.
Right.
But I guess 30 years of business experience has also taught me to be a realistic optimist.
Right. So what can you tell us a little bit about that, the realistic optimist? Because one of the things I wanted to ask you is about that authentic optimism. So I suppose realistic and authentic is probably the same, because you get a lot of people standing up and saying, oh yeah, it'll be fine, but they have no plan and it ends up not being fine. So what is that that leadership or that personal trait that allows people to not only say it's going to be fine and to be an optimist, but actually to put a plan in place to make it so?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Craig. I mean, it's exactly that. It's unrealistic optimism and positivity, I think, can be quite toxic for projects and organizations. One of the things that we just recently wrote an article about was the different checklists for transformations, because the business group in the Centre for Optimism works quite a lot on transformations for different companies. You know, you're in this situation and you want to get get to this situation. And we believe that at each stage of the process, optimism has a role to play, but it's not, fairies and unicorns type optimism. It's realistic optimism based on the fact that you've looked at what needs to be done, and you've inspired the people with an optimistic vision. But then when you've done the risk analysis, you've looked at the things that could go wrong, but you've also looked at the things that go right. I mean, that's where optimism infuses a project with something that's quite magical. And when you communicate to people, you communicate them with an optimism lens, but you don't do it when things are not going well. If things are not going well, you tell the truth and say, here, these things are working, these things are not. This is what we're going to change because we've realized these things are working. Because, as you know, whenever you start a project, you have a great plan and you've worked it all out and so on. But it doesn't always, once things hit the ground, things don't turn out the way that you think they're going to turn out, and you have to adjust.
Right.
So you can either adjust in a negative way and say, oh, this is not going to work. We don't have enough resources. We don't have enough money, we don't have enough time, blah, blah, blah. Or you can say, well, okay, how do I make it work? That's the optimism, right? I know that this will work if I just do ABC. So then you're more inclined to do ABC instead of saying, well, no, it won't work.
Yeah, that capability, right, to be able to pivot or to come up with a plan or to analyze what's going wrong and to chart the direction. That's what you're saying. So that's that like that positive optimism, isn't it? So
well, it's also on what's going right, because people have a bit of a tendency to focus on what's going wrong, and it's not. You should never ignore what's going wrong. As soon as something goes wrong, you should quickly, figure out how to change course and fix that. But people often forget what's going right. So I'll give you an example for us. The Women's Network that I'm the president of. When COVID hit, we were all a completely in-person organization. So there was breakfasts, there was lunch, there was after work events, there was, it was all people meeting to do professional, business things, training courses, self-development, whatever. And we got shut down like every other organization. Everybody got said, go home. So many associations folded in the last 2 years because
they didn't pivot.
No, because they couldn't pivot to being online. And within a month, we had pivoted to doing all online events, which we kept for a year and a half. It was all online. And, there was online coffee mornings and, various things, because what we discovered is we looked at our market and we said, well, everybody's stuck at home and it's a bit scary and it's a bit boring and it's a bit, all the things that people miss with the interaction with people. How can we at least give them something to hang on to? And Victor ran a few optimism cafes for us, and it just was so important for people. People came back to me and said, oh, thank goodness you did that. It was lovely, and it gave me a real lift, and I look forward to these Zoom meetings, even though I'm on Zoom all day and I'm so tired of Zoom. At least
I think we all are,
it's community. So I think that's important to be able to pivot, but to be able to pivot in a way that's, okay, this is a bad situation I have, but what can I do? How can I change?
How can you change? Yeah, right. And I think this is a way Steve and I started to do this whole series anyway, because people were focused on that negative, right? What is the problem? This is the problem. This is the problem. But actually, what you say is exactly right. Well, what are the positives? What are the things that can happen, or what can we do about it? How can we solve the problem? That's what was missing in the discussion, I think. So I think you're spot on that. Can I ask you? We're talking about positivity. If you're a leader in an organisation, and you've been a leader in some big global organisations, so sometimes there's a crisis, right? And sometimes there's just transformation that needs to happen in the organisation, which is quite different, right? But you still need to be able to get up there. Do you think there's any difference in that, in the way you have to lead, if there's a crisis that say the organisation's being flooded, like we've had a lot of flood in Australia recently, or say you've got a situation like they've got in the Ukraine at the moment, which that's a bit of a crisis for sure, or you may be just doing a transformation. So these are still things that require positivity and optimism, and leadership. How does that differ? How are the things differ between a crisis and a transformational requirement in an organisation?
Well, as you know, we are super lucky to have as our chairman for the Centre of Optimism is Rob, who is an expert in Australia on crisis communication. He's done a lot of that for every level of Australian government. And I think that the thing that I see it personally is that people are not easily fooled. I think it's sometimes if you're in a high level in an organization, it's easy to think that the people around you they're the ones who are the ones with the opinion, right? Because you're talking to a people at a certain level. And my very first company was Hewlett Packard back at the Australian Research Centre a long time ago now, and they had a big concept of management by walking around. And it was a big part of HP's success in the 70s, 80s, and 90s was that idea that the managers would get out there and they'd talk to everybody and they'd understand what was going on. And I think it's important, again, not to treat people as idiots. If things are going bad, then tell them the truth, right? You don't have to do it in a way, oh, doom and gloom, the world is falling. But if you can say to people, look, here's the problems that we're unexpectedly facing. And, honestly, if you're all flooded, I think everybody can see what the problem is. There's no, if bombs are dropping on your head in Ukraine, you know what the problem is. But then what's the optimistic path we can take? What are we going to do about it? I mean, people can understand that problems arise.
Right.
If you've got a plan and you've got an optimistic plan to deal with it.
And something that's believable, right?
A realistic plan. That's where we talk about realistic optimism, right? It's very important to have the realistic optimism part. Yeah,
because people are, I think, do you think that people are quite happy to be led if they believe in the leader and that the leader has an achievable plan? Do you think that?
I think partly, but I think what has changed as well is that things are a lot less hierarchical than they used to be in the workplace.
Yep.
So people don't just want to be led anymore. Some people do, but people also want to have their say.
Okay.
So it's very important to listen and to ask people's opinion. Doesn't mean you're going to follow everybody's opinion, but at least give them the chance to put it on the table. And then, companies are not democracies, even though people, will of course pretend that they are. They're not. There are hierarchies, but you're not. You don't own all the good ideas. So it's much better if you can get everybody to talk about what they think. Someone come up with a different idea that you hadn't considered. Everybody feels listened to. Then you can say, well, here's what's been put on the table. Here's the pros and cons of this versus that. And then a decision's made and you all move forward.
Thanks for watching this video on Humanised Workforce Future You. Please leave a rating or review for the series on the medium where you source your videos.
The transcripts for today's video can be found on craigsaffin.com. Please subscribe to the series to avoid missing out on future episodes.